And there we go. We are live. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where I'm reaching you. My name is Kevin Morris, and I am here with Les Kletke, calling in from Altona, Manitoba. You want to say hello, Les?
Hello.
So Les, we've been getting him actually, wanted to get him on the phone here for the last few days to talk about his book coaching process. I know we've received a lot of questions and a lot of interest about what book coaching is and what the process is. And really, I mean, speaking with Les with all the questions coming in, thought that it would be best if we took some time on this kind of a forum to go through the whole entire process and, of course, to answer some of the questions I have here on my other screen that we've collected over the past week or so since the Global Speaker Summit here in Vancouver. So I'm not going to spend too much of the introduction. Most of you have already had a chance to meet Les in person. If you haven't, you can go see his website at globalghostwriter.com to get more information directly about him. We'll have some more information at the bottom of this video. You can click down at any point in time. And of course, for those of you watching this video, not watching it necessarily live, will be some links down below this video as well, so you can get directed directly to his website. Or if you do want to talk to Les, of course, directly, then there's an opportunity to do that as well. So I don't want to bore you with too many introductory details here. Les, I mean, the biggest question that comes up to me is, why would you write a book? I mean, what's really the benefit to either a speaker, coach, or consultant to writing a book? I mean, you've had a lot of clients over the past 15 years. What's the biggest why?
The biggest benefit to writing a book is the notoriety, becoming an instant expert, and that's exactly what writing a book does. It establishes you as an expert in the field. I work with a number of speakers who have been speaking for years, and they all agree that when you publish a book, when you've got a book out there, suddenly you're recognized as an expert. It just gives you that much more credibility.
Now, you mentioned a really important word there, and that's that idea of instant expert. So really, I mean, writing a book is just writing a book. What's the connection between writing the book and publishing it and becoming an expert? How does that make you into an instant expert?
Well, the fact that you have a book, and it carries on from past generations when the idea of publishing a book was something really special. Technology today makes it so much easier, and so many more people are publishing a book that you almost have to have one to be in the business of speaking or to be a consultant. It's so much easier to do. And the one thing that I found when I published my first book was that it allows people to take some of you home with them. At the time, I was working as a speaker and telling travel stories. Primarily as an after-dinner entertainer, and people enjoyed the stories, and they'd ask if I had a book, if I had something that they could take away with them. And so I wrote my first book outlining exactly those stories, or expanding on those stories, I guess, and was able to triple my speaking fee just because I had a book. And I think there's still a large degree of that when you do have a book, it gives you that credibility because it allows people to take part of you home with them, and that they can enjoy your company in the comfort of their easy chair.
Right. You mentioned actually a really interesting topic. I mean, I can't imagine that everyone would have a lot of these sort of anecdotal stories or experiences from their different lifetime. So tell me, I mean, what should you be writing about? What's the topic? And does it necessarily depend on what your profession is? Like, for example, would a speaker write a different kind of book than, say, a consultant or a coach?
What you should write a book about is your passion, because while the process that we're going to get to later on in this program outlines the process of writing a book and makes it somewhat easier, there's still some work involved. And if it's your passion, that's just a lot easier. For speakers, I recommend that they write about the topic that they speak on. But so many people write on something entirely different. I mean, in the last month, the Prime Minister of our country published a book about the history of hockey and the old six in the NHL. So that doesn't really fit with the job that he has. And so you can write about something else, but for heaven's sakes, choose something that you already have the knowledge on, and that you're not going to be scrambling to do the research. Most books, or the books that I work with people, are not university textbooks. It's not something that you're looking out, going out to do the research on. You've done the research. You've lived the research. Everybody has anecdotal stories, and what do we like to hear? We like to hear stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I hate to admit this, but I actually have a book in process, and I've been collecting notes on this thing for at least the last couple of months. How do you go about the whole process of actually deciding what goes in that book? And I can't tell. I don't know how many tens of thousands of words I already have. I have all kinds of articles, things I pin to my wall, things I keep track of on my computer. I mean, how do you take all that information and then decide what actually gets into the book?
Kevin, that's the best start to writing a book, and for people who aren't ready to start at this time but are planning on writing a book, that's exactly what I recommend. Start that big box of things that you throw things into, that file folder, that you keep interesting stories that relate to the topic, so the day that you do sit down to write the book, you've got that information. And probably, as is with most cases, you'll have too much information. The challenge in writing a book, and what I find the real effort that I go through as a coach, is helping people focus on what goes into the book, what should be in the book, what's valuable, because we all have too many stories, too much information. Let's focus it down. When we decide what goes in the book, let's start by defining our target market. Who is our reader going to be? And I recommend that people go through the process and define the reader as to their age, their educational background, and even give them a name, so that they come up with a name like either Stanley or Janet, and we assign that. We define the character, assign them a name, so that then when we're working on the book, I can say, and how does that help Stanley? And if they can't explain how that helps Stanley immediately, if you can't tell me that in 2 sentences, that material is not in the book. So it's just a matter of picking a character, and where that came from is from Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas, at the headquarters of Walmart. They have a life-size cutout of their typical customer in the head office, and they've got it right down to how tall she is, and that she wears sweatpants with elastic on the bottom, and then they know that she drives a Chrysler minivan with a dented rear quarter panel. She's got 3 children, and they define their character, or their customer, that well. If it works for Walmart, why don't we use the same process? Define our customer, our reader, and then we can write specifically to them.
You actually just answered all my questions, because I can imagine you must struggle with you wanting to put every single thing you possibly can into the book, because like, people must have this impression, I know that I do, that everything that you possibly know has to be in this one book, otherwise you're not considered competent you'll forget something, and people will think that you just didn't know about it, that you didn't leave it out on purpose. So is that the process you go through, is identifying with this character or their own version of Stanley? Is that correct?
That's absolutely it. And the question that I ask most often in the coaching process is, how does that help Stanley? Mm-hmm. If you can't tell me how that helps Stanley, we're not going to put it in the book. And that's what keeps the book to a manageable size. Today, nobody wants to read, or very few people want to read War and Peace. They want a book. A lot of people want a book that is 1 airplane ride long. Now, certainly that's more than from Calgary to Edmonton. Mm-hmm. But if you're a book should be about 50,000 words. That's a manageable task to sit down to. So I like to keep a book to 50,000 words, and in that, break it up into 25 chapters, because we all go back to the days in grade school when we started reading chapter books, and how exciting it was when you finished a chapter and could start on a new one. Well, We've all kept a little bit of that enthusiasm inside us, and when you read, you like the completion. You like to complete a chapter and go on to the next one. So let's make our book 25 chapters, and that means that each chapter is about 2,000 words. That's a manageable task, but it's still too large to write in one sitting or one process if you don't break it up into component parts that remain throughout the book. So I break that down into 4 component parts of 500 words each.
Okay, we're getting a little ahead of I've got all these thoughts kind of racing in the background. I mean, the first thing is you mentioned 50,000 words, and I'm very interested in hear how you break down the process. I want to hear more about that. But before you even get to that point, I imagine that people start thinking, I mean, when I heard the 50,000 words, I'm like, when am I going to have time to write all this book, and how am I going to find that time? So what do you think's better? Should we start with the book writing process, or should we start about how we're going to find that time to create for the writing process? How do you usually approach it with your clients?
Let's find the time. We know who we're writing for, and exactly what you just did. Everybody stops me and says, I don't have the time. I can't find the time to write those chapters. And what I do with each one of these chapters is go through a process, a structure for each process that we ask questions, develop the outline, and then we can write that chapter, write those 2,000 words in roughly 2 hours. So you can find 2 hours. I don't ask anybody to find the time to write an entire book in one sitting, or to lock themselves in a cabin in the northern woods and write an entire book. Let's find 2 hours a day to write a chapter, and then it's a manageable task. It's a pleasant task. It's something that you look forward to doing. Actually, it can be quite relaxing once you know that you're going to get a chapter done, and there's a certain achievement. It's a lot like going to the gym. Really tough in the beginning, but once you get used to the habit, you miss it when you don't do it. So I for one, I'm in that habit of I got to write something every day, or else I don't feel the day is complete. And we can do that with anybody's book process, and that's why I say you can write a book in 30 days. There's 25 chapters, so we got a little bit of slippage there for a weekend or some day that comes along, but you can write a book in a month.
So Les, I'm just coming to you as a new client, and I've got probably the same kind of obligations a lot of the people have. You're running an 8 to 12 hour day, depending what's going on. You've got kids' activities, adding in the day. You're supposed to sleep in there somewhere. How do you then coach the person to finding that hour or that 2 hours of basically power writing each day? I mean, just walk me through it. I'm on the phone with you for the first time.
You're on the phone with me for the first time. I would ask you what your book is about. I would ask you who your market is, and then I would say, sit down and make a list of 25 items that have to be included in your book. 25 concepts. Now, if it's memoirs, those are the 25 most important incidents in your life. They could be your marriage, they could be the birth of your children, or an achievement in your job. If you're writing a book to be that instant expert, they're the 25 concepts that you want to include when you're teaching someone about the job, or the 25 achievements that you've made in your life. Make that list of 25, and then we'll turn those into chapters. Now, what we do in the coaching process is we schedule an interview where I'll ask you the questions to focus that chapter, find out the signature story that you have around that incident, and then write some of the reasons why that's important to you, and write the impact for Stanley. I'll find those in the questioning process and send you an outline that allows you to write that chapter in under 2 hours. So you can do that after the kids go to bed, or as soon as you come home from work, you sit down and do that to kind of unwind.
You mentioned a lot of things right there. Is there like a distinctive process or some sort of acronym that I can follow that I can remember while I'm doing this process?
The 4 parts of a chapter are ISRI: the introduction, the story, the reason, and the impact. So that's what keeps it in mind, and that's the secret. I use that when I'm coaching, but you can learn the process and do that yourself. Now you know what the chapter is about, and you know that you want to write a 500-word introduction, 500 words on the signature story. Tell me why that incident was important. That's the reason. Why did it make your list? And then the final part is the impact, which is what Stanley wants. And I maintain that you have to have something in there that Stanley can use as early as tomorrow. And then he'll turn the page and read the next chapter.
So in fact, we're not even talking about 50,000 words anymore. You're talking about, I mean, just break it down. I've got 50,000, I got 2,000, and I got 500. 500 words I can write. So just if you could just draw a clear line between.
You can write 500 words, but why should it even be that difficult? When we do the interview, I'll send you an outline that says use 150 words for this topic, use 200 words for that topic. So in fact, you're only writing 2 or 3 sentences at a time to each one of those topics. That's what allows you to do it in under 2 hours, because now you're only writing a couple of sentences to each one of those topics. And some people actually write it in the outline that I send them and then delete the outline. I think that's making it pretty easy, but I ask the questions, and then you write 500 words for each component part. And like we just talked about, it's kind of a natural flow. You use the introduction to set the stage, take the reader to your story, then tell your signature story. And in most cases, this is a story that you've told so often, it flows easy. You know how to make it work. Then tell me why it was important, and then give Stanley the tools that he can use as early as tomorrow.
And that's the ISRI. That's breaking down the 2,000 words into its each 500-word component, and then down each 500-word component down into its respective 150-word segments. Is that what I'm hearing?
150, and sometimes things are only worth 50. That's my job to assign it, because a lot of times the writer is too close to the forest to see the trees, and everything is not of equal value. So sometimes you can make a point in 50 words. And the important thing to remember is that you, like a speech, you can only make 2 or 3 points. So in those 500-word segments, we only need 2 or 3 important points in each one, and they're done.
Okay. Some other questions come to mind, and I do have some questions here that people had emailed in over the past week, so thank you all very much for that. How much credo do you put in terms of setting up like a physical space? Like,
I think that's tremendously important. Certainly, we can write when we're on the road and do those kind of things. But if you do have a home office or a place that you can set up, that's just so much easier, so that you're comfortable when you sit down. I agree that sometimes you're on the road and you have to get that chapter done, or you feel that you want to get that chapter done. But make a comfortable space where you're not being bothered, where you don't have the rest of your work issues clamoring over you. Set up a space that you're going to write, and use that as your sanctuary. When you get there, you know that you're writing your book.
Mm-hmm. So my iPhone on the bus or the SkyTrain commuting back and forth from work is not a good idea, in your opinion?
You know what, Kevin? I can tell you that it's not a good idea, and at the same time, I had a client who typed his entire book on his phone. When he started with that, I thought, this is going to be pretty slow. This is going to be tedious. And he was really good with his thumbs. He typed his entire manuscript on a phone. So it depends on the individual. I'm still a pen and paper guy. I believe in having a good pen and quality paper, just because it feels more comfortable to me. But at the same time, don't get hung up on that. If you have to write a note sometime on the bus or on the train, do it right on the back of an envelope. Abe Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address on the back of an envelope, and that was a pretty important speech. And if the truth be known, it's only 280 words. You don't have to write War and Peace to make a great impact.
So that actually brings up an excellent point, because does a book have to be 50,000 words to have an impact, Les? I mean, is there a range of a size of book that you consider to be, to establish that person as the instant expert? What is the optimal size of the book or the range?
Well, the optimal size is 50,000 words, because that works out to 3 sets of 64 pages. It's 192 pages, so that's 3 sets of 64 on a big press, and that's a more efficient run for the printing. But you could be doing an ebook, you could be doing a print-on-demand book. I would say that you need 35,000 words to have the credibility. Otherwise, it's a booklet, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is a place, there is a reason for the smaller books, and those are great, but they do not give you the credibility of having a real business-sized book, which I consider to be 9 by 6 and 200 pages.
Okay. So it's interesting, because you see a lot of Kindle books right now, and some of them are even as short as 60, 70 pages long, and you often wonder if someone just grabbed a microphone like I have here and spoke for 10 minutes and then published a book. I often wondered if that really established them as credibility, or just put a space up on Amazon. So you're saying you're looking at 180, 90 pages minimum to have that business book credibility status.
That's right. I mean, how often do you quote that 60-page book from Kindle? You might have taken one good point out of it. There's a purpose for it. It's very specific. It's very targeted, and it serves that purpose. But it doesn't serve to give the person, the author, the credibility in the industry and really make them an expert. It says that you had one good point, and it's valid in some areas, but really, it's not that you're going to call them for another speech, or it's not that you're going to call them for a training session for your sales staff.
Got it. Okay, so we talked a lot about some numbers in terms of the size of the book, which is now it's much clearer for me. Thank you. How long does this whole process take? You mentioned you write 2 hours a day. You have some slippage in there. I noticed on your actually at the Global Speaker Summit, you actually said specifically how to write a book in 30 days. So perhaps we can talk about the length of the writing process, of the creation process.
Well, the addendum to that is publish it in 90. So you're writing your first draft of the manuscript, which is really the guts of the book, in 30 days. Then I allow 30 days for the editing process and another 30 days for the printing. They don't need 30 days to print the book, but traditionally that's what a printer will schedule from the time they get the files in till they go through them, in case there's another proof required, and so you got to leave 30 days there as a cushion. The 30 days for the editor is where you don't want to be rushing. You want to allow your editor the time to go over that book and do it properly, because a rushed editor isn't going to catch all the mistakes, and you only have one chance for that first impression. I will flex on all of the other points that we've made so far, and whatever else we're going to talk about is only guidelines. The one hard and fast rule that I have is you have to use a professional editor. Everybody has a friend who took an English course at some time and is going to, or will offer to be your editor. Do not do that. 2 reasons. It's going to give you a poor quality book, and it's going to cost you that friend. So you have to use a professional editor.
It's interesting you should say that. One of the Facebook groups I belong to, there's a couple people writing books actually over the Christmas holidays. They're using this downtime as a chance to get some content in place. And one individual actually mentioned he was having his wife and his mother edit the book for him. So you're saying that's not the way to go, is that correct?
You know what? That's the way for him to go if he wants to leave the book on his computer. Okay? If he wants to feel that he wrote a book and then it was a family project, that's a great Christmas project. That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. If he wants to have a professional book that he's going to use to increase his credibility, to make more money, that is absolutely wrong. The example that I use is with speakers, and this one they can understand. When you go to a speaking engagement, which clothes do you wear? They normally wear their very best. I have yet to meet a speaker who stops at Value Village on the way to a speaking engagement to buy a suit. Why in heaven's name would you do that with the image of your book? You hire the best professional that you can afford. Now, and a rule of thumb, Pierre Berton, who did all right as a writer in this country, Pierre Berton counted on using a third of his book budget for editors. Well, if that was good enough for Pierre Berton, it's good enough for me. Count on spending 1/3 of your budget with your editor.
All right, you've sold me, Les. You sold me. Now,
I don't know if it came across that I'm pretty strong on that point. I'll flex on a lot of other stuff. The editor is a no deal.
All right, so I understand not to email you immediately after this session and ask you to edit my next book. All right, so Les, okay, so you've sold me. I understand there's a lot of formulaic writing that's involved here. I'm sure I can pick up a couple of books about how to write a book or follow some of the ideas you've already given on this session. Now, tell me though, beyond those particular formulas and that breaking it down, if you will, can you just tell me, I mean, what specific value do you bring as the book coach to the entire process?
The first thing that I bring as a book coach is a conscience. People say that knowing that I'm going to call them the next morning for another call forces them to write the chapter the night before. It's easier to write the chapter than to think of an excuse why you didn't write. So the modern term would be an accountability partner, and that's the first and the most important thing. Another value is that I can assure you that at some point, usually around chapter 18, you're going to get to the feeling that this is a bunch of dribble and you're wondering if anybody is going to read it. So it's my job to talk you down off of the ledge and say that yes, you have some valid material here and we should continue writing the book. That's something that happens to everybody along the process. But a big advantage that people don't think of until they get into the process is the value of discussing the ideas and me challenging you with some questions that force you to justify your ideas, to think about them a little deeper. So the questions make you define the points that you're going to use more clearly. You're more concise with those points. And I'm coming at it from the reader's point of view. You're too close to the forest to see the trees. Larry King, who interviewed a lot of authors on late night TV, never read the book before the TV segment because he said the TV audience didn't have that advantage. He wanted to come at it from the audience's point of view. I want to ask you questions from the reader's point of view. I want you to explain that material to me.
Right, so that actually goes well beyond anything that I could ever read in a book or doing on my own. What I really like what you said is the fact that I can see getting at least half to 3/4 way full. I'm going to get lost at some point during the process.
Well, the idea of a book coach, and when I work with people, it's an individual. I'm helping you write your book. I'm not putting your information into a template. There's other book coaches or whatever you want to call them that their goal is to have 1,000 published authors this year. Well, I don't think that they can provide any kind of personal service. My goal is to help you write your book, and I'll do that by asking you some questions, by giving you a process that works, but helping you learn it for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 books that you're going to write.
Actually, you just made an incredible point. I just had a breakthrough. I was just thinking, how many books am I actually going to be writing in my entire lifetime? I might get maybe 2 or 3, if I'm lucky, 4, 5, 6, like you just mentioned. When you write a book, it's an amazing process. It's actually, never mind the actual creative aspect, but it's also life-changing in the process itself, and of course it's publishing the actual book and getting your message out to the world. It seems to me that, if you had a book coach along for the process, not only would that enrich the process and the path, but actually give a lot more meaning to what the actual completion of the book. Is that, I mean, what's been some of the experiences that some of your previous clients have had, or what are some of the things that they've shared with you?
The absolute highlight, and I've had this privilege with several of my clients, is to go to the printers to pick up the book. And when you see that pallet of books, you just want to open the box and say, yes, there's a box of books and I wrote them. And that is still the biggest thrill for me, and it was a big thrill when I had my own books. It's a big thrill to go with a client and open that box of books, and yes, there they are. So that's huge, and it's surprising. I have always said that I will teach you the process that you can use on other books, and yet I have had several clients say that after we've gone through the process, and it makes the process so much easier, they will call me to do their second and their third book. It's just that it makes the process easier, it makes it quicker, cleaner, and they feel a better book. So when I started this business, I did not expect to have a lot of repeat customers, and I have had many people come back and ask about helping them with the second book, and in fact, that's the way it's gone.
Listen, there's so much more we could talk about here. I mean, really need to have another session online where we can discuss some more of these ideas. My mind just keeps racing when you're talking with all these different things. With interest of time here, Les, we probably should move on to at least some of the questions here that I have. I've taken a lot of the questions and I've condensed them into about 6 or 7 here. So do you have some time left to answer a few questions, Les?
I've got time to talk about books anytime.
Perfect. All right. Well, listen, let's get to these questions for now, and then let's promise everybody that we're going to spend another session within the next couple of weeks, again, fleshing out the process a little bit more, and then opportunity to ask or answer any specific questions. So one of the first ones, actually, a lot of people wrote in about the editors. And I know we talked about that a little bit in terms of the importance that you place the editors in the entire process. You mentioned potentially 1/3 of the budget. That is obviously one particular extreme. But in your whole book coaching process, you're obviously not the editor. Can you talk a little bit about what the editor's role plays in terms of me becoming one of your clients?
The editor, and I have a list of 2 or 3 editors that I recommend. The editor is a lot like dating. You have to find the one that fits for you. The first one that you meet might not be right for you. So what I recommend is sending a sample chapter to 2 or 3 prospective editors and getting it back from them and finding out which one is in the voice that you want to keep. Which one fits your voice the best, and that's who you should use as an editor. And any editor worth their salt will do a sample chapter for you to show you what their work is like. So that's the first judgment. If they won't do a sample for you, move on.
Okay, that's really important to know. Another big question that came up, of course, is, okay, you said 30 days to write a book, 90 days to publish, which we've just discussed here on this call. Do you actually help them? So you get this big pallet, you pick it up from the printers, and now do you actually help them sell the book? I mean, the big question is, I got a book, now what? What happens next?
During the process of the interviews, we'll come up with some ideas on how to sell the book, and that's one of the things that comes out in your target market. Mm-hmm. We're trying, in the very first interview, we're trying to work with that. But I also have a part of my team that includes somebody who will work with you on the sales perspective and on the electronic portions of the book. That's not me. And I have an editor. That's not me. In fact, my editor has on occasion asked me if I typed the manuscript with my mittens on. So I am not the perfect. My manuscript is rough when it goes to her, but we've worked together on a half a dozen books. She knows what I want to say, and she makes me say it. So and I also have a design person as a part of the team that I can recommend. I used to call him a typesetter, and he pointed out to me that a typesetter is a very arcane term that refers to the days of hot lead and movable type. He now designs books and helps you with the cover. So I have a team of a salesperson and an editor and a book designer that I can recommend. Certainly you're able to use the people that you want, if you have somebody else or somebody that you want to work with, but for somebody who's writing their first book and doesn't want to do all the shopping, I have 2 or 3 people in that area that I can recommend.
So what I'm hearing is that you have an entire team in place that you can make recommendations. You have often in your sort of skill set matrix at least 2 or 3 people that you can recommend in each particular area. Is that correct? But you don't help them. You don't help them sell the book, but you have someone that you could recommend that would help, for example, market their book and promote it after the publishing. Is that what I'm hearing?
I have someone that I strongly recommend, and that happens to be the person that looks after my marketing. So I mean, that's why we're doing this. I have someone that I recommend, and I have some ideas about how to make your book worth, or some copies worth a lot more. In my seminar, what I say is how to make your book worth $100 so that you can sell copies for $100.
Okay, that's already a topic for another session. How to sell a book for $100. That's I love that title. Let's move on here. You mentioned the word copies, Les. How many do you usually recommend people print? And I'm sure it must depend on a number of factors. If you could please walk us through that.
It depends on a number of factors, but the most important is don't get carried away. You can always do a second run, but just because 4,000 is the best seller in Canada doesn't mean that you should print 4,000, because then you're going to have to sell them. The average book run in Canada is only 1,300. I recommend somewhere from 500 to 1,000 on your first run.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's keep moving here. One of the questions, I'm not really sure if I understand it, maybe you will, but I just put on the list, it said marketing with other products.
That's obviously from a speaker. How do you market your book with other products? And if you've got a CD of one of your presentations, and how do you put it together? And the old rule of the more products you have, the more people will buy is so true. So if you have a book, if you have a CD, if you have a workbook, you can package the 3 together, give people a discount, and that really helps out with the marketing. Sometimes it might be a book that you've had in the past, and you put the 2 products together and sell them as one package. But certainly a book is a good thing to include with a CD or an audio of a presentation.
And that's, again, that could be, I'm hearing a lot of marketing questions here and promotions questions, so that can actually be a topic for another session, maybe later this month or next. Next one, publish or self-publish. What's your response?
This is probably the second most asked question I get after how do I find the time. Publish or self-publish, it's up to you, and depending on where you want to go with this. If finding a traditional publisher is getting more difficult and more difficult, the days of writing a great manuscript and mailing it to a number of publishers and waiting for that response, they're getting fewer and fewer. Unless you're Al Gore or Bill Clinton, you're not going to get a great check in the mail just to write your manuscript. In fact, most people tell me that the advance that they get from a publisher today allows them to go out for a nice dinner. So that's what you can count on if you do find a publisher. And the other thing, that when you do find a publisher, you're probably looking at another 2 years to get it to market. Now, the thing that a publisher does do on the positive side is it gets your books into a lot of bookstores, and it gets you greater distribution. That's certainly a big plus, that it does give you that distribution. So you have to weigh out which is right for you and which is the market that you want to go into. How quickly do you want to get a book into the marketplace, and how will you be selling them?
You know that there's a lot of distribution these days seems to be the last problem people are having, especially with Amazon and Kindle stores, with the explosion of the iPads and tablet devices. Seems that problem is going to be that answer to that question is probably going to change quite a bit over the next 12 to 16 months.
Well, the answer to that question might change, but the process of writing a book will change very little, because you still have to have the information. You still have to go through the process of writing the manuscript and having it edited. The only difference that changes from traditional printing to ebooks is the very last step. You have to have that file complete, and then you can either load it to an ebook or take it to a traditional printer. But up until that final step, the process is exactly the same.
You must be reading my next questions here, because the next one actually was someone asked about ebooks, hardcover, and versus soft cover. So what discussion do you usually have with your clients on that topic?
Yes, every one of them, because they all appeal to different markets. So you've gone through all of the effort to get a book through a completed file. Mm-hmm. Why lose an avenue now? I recommend getting an ebook up there for the people that want to read on their Kindle. Having a soft cover book that people can take along, that's the book that they're going to read on the plane or on the bus. And I recommend having a few hardcover books done that you can use as thank you gifts to people that hire you and as promotional items.
Right, because I noticed you talk about the instant expert status. I know a lot of people actually mailing books to a very targeted, cherry-picked audience of potential clients. So those would be the people, obviously, that you send the hard book covers to. Is that what you're saying as one idea?
Absolutely, and it's going to stay in their office. It's going to be on their desk or on the bookshelf. When someone calls them and asks if they can recommend a speaker, well, your book is there. And so it costs a few dollars to print a hardcover book, but when was the last time that someone asked you to autograph your sales brochure or your business card? And that's exactly what a book is. It's your business card. And when you autograph that and leave it with them, it stays there, and people still enjoy getting books and having them personalized. I probably autograph 80% of the books that I sell.
Wow, so it's amazing perceived value, obviously, that's being used here. I'm hearing.
They want to take a part of you home with them, and when you sign it and give it a personal note, it's even more meaningful.
Right. One more question here, Les. I just want to be respectful of your time. And obviously, with the Global Speaker Summit, this would have come up. But the topic was turning speeches into books. Now, I don't know much about that, but I'm sure you do.
Well, there's some people that think about having a book or having their speech transcribed and then it's ready to go. That might work for a blog or a post on your website. The information is the same, but you cannot transcribe a speech and turn it into a book. I have lots of questions about turning blog posts into a book. I used to be opposed when people wanted to turn newspaper columns into a book. You write a book for the sake of writing a book and write it accordingly. You can use the same information, but you have to write it in a book format. People write their speeches to deliver live. They write books to be read.
So it's a completely different medium and port of delivery, is it not?
It's a completely different medium, and so it should be respected and written for accordingly.
Okay, listen, that was most of the questions here that I basically condensed them into 6 or 7. Is there anything here or anything that we've discussed that you feel is really valuable to understand in terms of book writing in general and/or your book coaching process?
I think we've covered most of the topics that I normally run into, most of the questions that people have when they're starting out the process. I invite anybody who's listening or live or gets the recording, give me a call, and I'm more than happy to talk about your book, and that's what I emphasize in the coaching process. It's not a template that we try to squeeze the information in. I want to work with you to write your book.
All right. Well, listen, Les, thank you very much for your time today. At least it expands the topic a lot more. I know we had some questions, and a lot of people wanted to hear more about the process. Certainly, we need to do this a couple more times because you brought up a whole bunch of topics that we just simply didn't have time during today's session. For those of you actually listening either live right now or to the replay, this recording will be made available on Les Kletke's YouTube channel. Below this video, there will be a couple of links in terms of getting more information either on his website, and more importantly, the offer that Les extended to you just now in terms of giving you a personal one-on-one coaching session. Now, Les, so what's the offer that you make to people in terms of the coaching session? What's the details on that?
The offer is the same as I made prior to the Global Speakers Summit. You've got a 1-hour call to talk about your book, and it's absolutely free. We'll talk about the process, any questions that you have about writing a book or how my process works, and we'll see if we're a good match to work together. And from then on, we can discuss the issue of cost of book coaching or how we can make it work. But I offer you a 1-hour consultation, no obligation, no fee.
All right. Well, that's pretty generous, Les. Thank you very much. And I will put we'll put a link down below this video so you can sign up for that time with Les directly. I mean, certainly having the ability to talk with you for an hour would actually be very valuable. As you mentioned, there is no obligation. It'd be 1 hour focused exclusively on your book and on your topic. And thank you very much for that. So that's it for me. I have no more questions here on my list, so we'll just say thank you very much to all of you for taking some time out to listen to this, either again live or to the replay. We'll have this posted. We'll send it out to everyone so they know it's available. Feel free to share it with your family and friends and other people that you know that might be interested in writing a book, just for the information, or of course to contact Les directly and have that conversation. So that's it. I'll wish everyone a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are and when you're watching this. And thanks again, Les, to you. I'll be hoping to have the session with you again very, very soon.
Thank you, and good writing.
Thanks, Les. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.